Good afternoon, everybody. I hope everybody's doing well. This is a special edition. And how this came about was Joe reached out and we were talking back and forth, and he wanted to come on a podcast. And I did ask, are we going to be talking what happened last week? And he said, yeah, he's open to that. So what we're going to do is bring Joe in, and we're going to start having a conversation here. Thank you if you're here. I appreciate it. And let's bring Joe in. Hey, sir.
Hey, John.
How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Doing good.
So,
Always doing good.
so we were originally scheduled a podcast, you and I, and I think just to kind of set this up. So you've been somebody I followed for a while. You followed me too. You were a big account at the time, and you subscribed, and I was really honored by that. And I loved your writing because I think we're somewhat similar, but not really. This, like, you talk about, the travel on road, which is kind of cool. You talk about going to all these states and how a military vet and all this stuff, and how you take all that and you put that in your writing somehow or another. And I really loved your perspective on life and how you looked at life. And so I was really excited to bring you on and have that conversation. And then you dropped. Do you want to? So let's start with that weekend coming in, because we were communicating back and forth. And then I got the email and I got the text. What was going on at that time?
It's. I think one of the reasons my writing resonates with a lot of people is because it's genuine and it's authentic, and I'm really speaking about how I feel in the moment, and while and I don't want anybody to take slight with this, because I appreciate the people that are putting out positivity every day. I appreciate the people that are putting out good news every day. I appreciate all the people that are, the world is groovy and everything's good. But I think there also needs to be a side of art and writing that states, no, we're not all like that all the time. And life does suck sometimes. And there's ups and downs. None of us are always up here. None of us are always down here. The majority of us are up and down and up and down. And as I go through my writing, I go through these, I don't want to call them trends. I go through these I go where it takes me, but why don't we take that? Sometimes I'll write about my military past. Sometimes I'll write about my travels. Sometimes I'll write about this or that. I've written about suicide. I've written about a lot of things, but I think all these are branches within human existence that need to be explored.
Right.
And within a writing community, you're constantly waging that battle between why am I writing and who am I writing for? And the majority of the time, as selfish as it sounds, I'm writing for myself.
I think we all do that, by the way.
When I start feeling like I'm putting out a product instead of something genuine or being genuine or being authentic, something within me gives. And I'm not going to pretend I understand that yet. It's part of the journey, and I'm sure everybody has their opinions on what that may or may not be. And it just kind of hit me that weekend and the before our thing, and I felt at that time like I was being a product. I wasn't being genuine. I didn't have the capacity to be genuine. And
you were feeling that. No one else was putting that on you. It was
no, nobody else was saying that. It was just I'm part of a men's group, and I'll tell you where this comes from. We were discussing it the other night. I have this thing within me. If something bothers me, I'll make a note on my phone, and I'll sit down at night and I'll research and say, why did what this person say to me affect me so badly? Why did me having that thought upset me so
Right.
badly? Why did I watch this on TV and it upset me? Because I think that's where we learn is when we encounter an uncomfortable situation, and we need to figure out why it's made it, because there's something within us that rebelled or rejected that idea or caused anger or upset to that idea, and we need to discover what that is. And especially because I write a lot about masculinity, the male mindset is always to forge ahead, you
Yeah.
know, forge through the pain, forge through the anger, forge through the hurt, forge through everything. And that is, forgive my French, a piss poor way of living,
Yeah.
because you, um, I think every man gets to a point in his life where he snaps. And I'm not saying I snapped last week. I have in the past, but I think we all get to a point where we shove down so much, trying to maintain that balance and that civility, and assure our families that everything's going well. Um, we can't swallow it all.
Right.
And where writing was my outlet for all that, it became something I was leaning on it the wrong way. Maybe that's the way to put it.
Yeah.
Instead of being at my outlet, it had become my crutch. And and the minute I felt that, I was kind of, I need to take a step back and walk away from this for a little bit, um, because I know for the first year when I publish things, every time I publish something, there's that little twinge of, oh, will it land? But there's also that twinge of, man, I did this, and
Right.
I was always happy with it. And the last 3 or 4 pieces I did before that, I'd lost that joy.
Yeah.
And to be honest, that scared the hell out of me, because I was like, this is the thing I love doing, and it scares me.
I can actually resonate with that big time because that happened to me. I think last year, October, I was getting a burnout. I wasn't really happy with my stuff. I mean, even though people praised it, it was me that not wasn't happy. I wasn't happy with this because I was producing. I wasn't writing. And it took some soul searching to kind of like say, this is not what I want to do. And I mean, I think when I was smaller, it was much easier to write. Does that make sense? I don't know if that makes
Oh,
sense.
absolutely.
Because you had a smaller audience, people loved your work, you got more, I guess, more praise, I guess, or how you want to put it. But you were more like you weren't you weren't trying to you weren't trying to be better. You weren't like you were being better every day because it helped you. But I don't think it was more of, I don't know, like now when you hit this mile mark where I'm at, it's a different type of game. And obviously subscribers come and go really fast. They're on a carousel. They'll and then you ask them what turned you off, and it was basically email notifications. I'm just like, well, that's stupid. I mean, it just didn't like it just felt like you're being beaten up for stuff that you were just offering. I don't know if
Hmm.
that makes sense. I'm just trying to
Oh, absolutely makes sense, 'cause especially if you're putting it out there for free,
right.
and people are like,
Yeah.
it makes sense. And as much as we'd like to pretend that it doesn't affect us, and John, I think people may think once you get to a certain size that it doesn't matter anymore, when actually the opposite is true. You
Right.
know, I know who my first followers were, and I know who my first paid subscriptions were, and whether I want to enunciate that, whether I want to call it out, every time I lost one of those, it hurt.
Oh yeah.
And you log in and that damn dashboard's there, and you're like, man, I lost a paid subscriber, and it's not like I got hundreds of them.
Right.
you know. So I'd go look despite myself and say, oh my God, this person left and they followed me since, the third or fourth thing I've posted.
Yeah.
And because we're conditioned to think that way, you're right. You're like, what did I do wrong? Where did I go off the track? And then you've got that war inside you. Am I performing for them, or is it just them taking a different path? And while it's easy to sit there and write a piece about I don't care and I'm on my journey,
Yeah.
the human psyche doesn't work that way.
Mm.
And um, those people that once you get to a certain level, they're like, they don't know how, they think once you get to a certain level, that we don't need to talk to them. We don't need to comment. We don't need to say anything. And again, the converse is true. The opposite of that is true. I, I really want to hear from you more.
Yeah.
I was fine being a guy with 20 subscribers. And it's odd that the bigger I get, the more uncertain I get about, not what I'm putting out, but is this actually making any sense to anybody but me?
Yeah.
Um, and, you know, it's not, I don't want to phrase it and to say that it's, what's the word I'm looking for? Um, Validation. But you are, I mean, to use the most overworked phrase in writing today, you are screaming into the void.
Mhm.
And you do want to know that you're heard.
Or mattered. You feel like
Yeah,
you
I
mattered.
mean,
Yeah.
especially, those ones where you're pulling your heart out of your chest and saying, hey, you know, today really sucked, or, um, and I think one of it was a comment or a post I wrote. I generally stay out of politics because I'm very volatile with my politics. I don't. I'm very
I
blunt,
think we all are, tell you the truth.
and
I just can't, I just don't know where we went off the rails, but there you go.
well,
I mean,
I don't. And I was writing in the article about because my wife she's a minority,
yeah.
and my stepson's a minority, and of course my daughter's half minority now. And I shared in that article about them being chased home by a group of guys and telling her to go back to where she came from, and she's terrified. And the first comment I get is from this guy that's saying, "You're being emotional and overreactive." And my first comment as a human being is like, "Dude, come say that to my face." You know, let somebody chase your kid home and tell
Yeah.
me I'm being irrational and emotional. And it I don't know. It was just kind of a critical, just mess of what am I actually doing here? And then, I think you have to address the elephant in the room, that at this exact moment in my life and where I'm examining my writing and examining my personal life, Substack decides, hey, we're going to go 90 degrees in a different direction.
Oh, yeah. So I'll give you a prime example. So I set up your live, like I had a live before this, and I was doing a live again, and I had you all scheduled, and that's gone. And I'm like, it used to be much easier. I was able to like schedule people, and I was able to kind of get things organized. They took care of that. I used to remember, I don't know how long you've been on here, but I remember when you had to chase your own subscribers. It wasn't something you can go on notes, and I don't think notes existed when I was on here.
No, I wasn't that early, but I remember when notes really mattered. And I would, there were a couple notes I posted that got 30, 40,000 likes.
Wow.
And then all of a sudden I get six, and then I disappeared. And the algorithms have changed, and I'm not turning this. Don't If you're watching this, I'm not turning this to gripe fest about Substack. I'm just saying, um, it derails you, because you've got this thing figured out. Um, I'm not Tom Clancy. I'm not, one of the big guys, but you have to accept the fact that there's a lot of us out there that had a couple thousand, few thousand subscribers. And when you yank the rug out from under you and say, okay, those people can't find you anymore except through this email, which is the one thing, like you said, that aggravates everybody, or most people.
Oh, it aggravated me because it
Well,
motivated me to figure it out. How do I get rid of all these emails? I was having like 20, 30 emails a day. Not that,
well, I was getting more than that. And
well, that was a small account. Then I fixed
but
it.
you remember when we used to log in and there was at the top, there was the banner with everybody you subscribed to.
Right. Yeah.
And
That's
I would
gone.
log in at 5 a.m. and I'd click on them and I'd read everybody's article and I'd go down the list and say, okay, make my comments and do everything.
Yeah.
And then they took that away. And now there's this little widget on the side that's
Yes.
the top 10,
Yeah.
bestsellers. And I don't care about those guys. I cared about supporting what I was. And um, when they again, it was just that critical mass of all three of those things. And I don't mind. I've never minded saying, it's not been the easiest 3 years of my life. So it. I think if I had a checklist for the 10 most difficult things to happen in a week that could have happened, they all hit that week.
So you just
And
hit a
and
wall.
and I just got to Sunday and I was like, dude, I'm done. I'm
Right.
done with everything.
So you just
And
basically hit a wall and you're just kind of
mhm,
like, you need a reset. And that's one of the texts you said you wanted a reset. And I think so if I may be frank, I'm not saying this. I'm not a woman, so I don't know what the women mindset is. But for men, and you said this, we're kind of have to forge ourselves through this process of making do with what we have.
mhm,
And sometimes our plate is really fuller than we want to be. And then what happens is it's because we're expected to be the hero and the expectations and save everybody. I'm not saying that that's what we want to do, but typically that's our role where we're providing, we're doing all this. And then you got the family issue, you got work issues, you have friend issues, you got parent issues. I mean, whoever, you got these issues, you got these dynamics going on. And then the one place where you want to go refuge and you just want to pour your heart out. So you have a place not to vent, but to put peace in mind of something, it's
mhm,
turning into an attack an attack situation where you're now constantly battling all these changes. And the one point you said, it was really good to see all your followers, all your subscribers, where you can actually comment, and that's taken away. So when they start ripping things away from you, it almost feels like life itself because
yeah,
what you had is no longer easy anymore. It's more complicated. And for a male, and I only speak for myself, I can't speak for anybody else, but from a male's perspective, you want to fix it and you want to help those. And you just extend and extend and extend. And all of a sudden it gets to a point like, how far do you go with this?
yeah. I mean, I agree. I think that the issue for me, um, was more. I said, we can only speak to it as a man,
Right.
um, obviously, um, and there is that urge, like I said, to fix it. But you know, I think there's culturally speaking, and again, masculinity is one of my favorite things to write about because I think one of the most eye-opening things that I realized in the past 20 years was I got to a point where I realized, I grew up and thought I was the good guy. And then I realized one day I was an asshole.
Mm.
And I was that guy, you know, and, um, and that wasn't 2 years ago. It was a while back, but I had daughters and, I'll try to do well by them. I got another 3-year-old daughter, and I love these moments in some sense because it gives you things to address and things. And I think it is rewarding in a sense to throw things out there and say, "This is what I learned this week," because I don't think we stop learning at 18 or 16. Um, I don't think we stop learning until the day we die. And the goal's never to be perfect. The goal is to be as good as we can. And when we have invested, and maybe that's the good word, had invested so much of my life into that one tool that when it was taken away, it kind of unmoored me a little bit. And I'm like, this was my primary outlet. And now, here I am, a man and a human, and humans hate change. Humans detest change, whether they say they don't or do. They hate change.
Yeah.
And I wake up one morning and I log in and I'm like, what is going on here? Who took my toys, and what am I doing? And again, it's just that critical mass of everything. Um, but I took a break and I sat down and said, is it really that I want to quit writing? Is it really that I want to quit doing what I'm doing? And the answer was a resounding no, that I love writing. I love doing what I do. I love speaking. I love being on the lives. I love being a part of these things. Um, Part of it was resentment, if I'm honest, that they'd done that to me. And that's not to say it as a victim, because I'm a big boy. I know how the world works. They're going to do what's best for them, and that's to be expected. But I'm also, like I said, I think I'm old enough and grown enough now to realize when something twists me up that much that I need to take a step back and figure out what I'm doing and why I'm doing the things that I am doing before I forge ahead. Because anything I say from or do from that point forward is probably going to be bad and not conducive to either my growth or what I put out there.
Well, the good thing, just hearing you saying you've recognized yourself and you know where the boundaries are. That's huge. For anybody. Sometimes people don't even know what the boundary is and don't know the limitations of their behavior, let's say it. And so knowing that, that's a good thing. But one of the things I do want to say, this is one of the things I love about your writing. It reminds me of Hemingway a lot. And it's because of the nostalgia, the way you put things together, your philosophy of life, how you kind of like work things through. Like even your travels, you're sitting in a diner and you're kind of like you're reminiscing and you're also recognizing the moment. And that's the kind of stuff that, that's a huge, I mean, that's just, so that's how I feel about your writing. It's really,
Well,
yeah.
thank you. I'm honored that somebody would say that. I'm a huge Hemingway fan,
Well, so am I.
and
So,
as Hemingway said, all you got to do to write is sit down at a typewriter and bleed.
yeah.
And I think there's obviously there's nonfiction, there's fiction, right? And there's different genres of writing. But if you're going to write, for me, I am going to write authentically.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a reward and there's a risk in that, especially in a male community.
Oh, yeah.
And I understand that we live in a patriarchy, and I understand the society we live in, but I think it's imperative, that women also realize that we run risk too. And when we step outside of our assigned identity or our assigned roles, and we start talking about, how we feel
Yeah.
or how we thought, and that's anything but, like I said a while ago, I'll meet the dude in the alley, and we're risking stuff, and it's not the females that attack us, it's our peers that attack us.
Mhm.
And sometimes it's our own families that attack us because you're outside the boundaries of what
The perception. Well, the perception.
masculinity is in
Yeah.
America.
But there's
And
also, it's also their perception of you. So like I said this before, or just last hour, when I started posting on Facebook, they started coming after me with knives. Like, you're not a writer. What are you doing? This is a joke. And I was out of bounds. I wasn't in my lane. I wasn't the John that they perceived. Even my family were like, what? You know, um, that was all hurtful. Don't get me wrong. And how do you express that? How do you write that down? You can't. It's your. I mean, I'm gonna throw my whole family apart and just say this is what it is. I'm not gonna do that. But what are you gonna do? You sit there. So that's why when I came to Substack, it was very different from other platforms because it was part of the community. It was part of the conversation. Everybody was trying to be more than they were yesterday, and that growth was all about writing and what that means to you and how you connect with other people. And that's where I think that's where Substack is trying to become more like a social media platform of other things. I never thought of that here. I always thought it was like a publication. Your Substack is a publication, like your newspaper. And your articles are there, you're everlasting, and they're kind of sit there. And when I publish in other areas, I don't get the response. I used to get better responses months ago, like maybe over a couple of years ago, but now I mean my rates are lower than before. And it's because they keep changing, and I think they keep trying to go in that direction. I think it's a big mistake.
I do too. I think it's forcing a lot of people to become the product that they're trying to resist becoming, and to make yourself marketable to to people that generally wouldn't follow you. And I've always maintained that's the surest way to hell, is to start following that path. I think there are millions of people on Instagram and TikTok and Substack that are completely fake. They don't believe what they say. They don't practice what they preach. I used to make fun of it all the time on the humorous side. There are probably 1,000 Substacks that tell you how to get big that only got big because they're telling you how to get big. They don't get big using their own formula. They get big by telling you, this is how you get big.
You see those accounts. They import all this they import all these followers from other platforms or wherever the list they get from. And reality is they're not. I had a creator on here, a fellow writer, who was number one on literacy, number one, and was number one all the time. He hounded me. He trashed my notes. This is you post too much, whatever, and he started jumping all over me. And the guy blocked me. And that was a small account. I was like maybe 250, 100, like less than 300 people. And I'm thinking to myself, why are you chasing me down? You should be lifting me up. Is it because you're jealous because I'm getting more recognized than you are because of my notes? Like, really? You should be praising each other. That's what I thought this platform's about. And it wasn't. It was about, I'm a big thing now. You just gotta follow my rules, and I'm not a good follower of rules.
we get along there because there's a rule, I'll break it. No, I think people. I don't know, and like I said, I don't want to turn it into a bash Substack thing because I don't think that's what it's about. I think it's
it's trying to understand. It's trying to understand the situation.
Yeah,
and
I think they need to understand the situation.
Exactly. I agree. I agree. And it's hard. I mean, like today, I, you know, I was burnt out coming into December. I was like, I really need to change the way I was writing because I felt like you. I felt like I was being a product. Now, would I love to make money on this? Absolutely. I would
Hmm.
love to make money off this. I would love to have $1 million worth of sales of my books and things like that, you know. And you hear that all the time on Substack that people are getting book deals, or there was a movie like a movie produced because of Substack.
Hmm.
And you kind of like that's a shiny object. You're like, well, that's pretty cool. But what people don't understand is the months that they had to do what it took them to get there. I mean, and it's everybody's different and not everybody's the same way. And I think that's where we put so much. I think the writers put too much. We put so much pressure on us because we care. We care about our writing. We care about responding to our subscribers. It hurts when they leave us. It's we just care, and we're not sensitive. We just care that someone was willing to subscribe to us at one time, and then they decided to leave for whatever reason. And as you say, I know my earliest. Like you're one of my earliest ones. I mean, one of my big accounts. You came and you became a subscriber, which I was honored by that, and and I think that's the problem. I think are we putting the expectations on, and it's not really the Substack issue, or is it a combination of both?
I think it's a combination. I think before it was mainly us, and I think let's examine this from traditional publishing to
Online.
Substack
Yeah.
publishing, right? Because the feedback, again, we're in that feedback, that gratification loop when we're on Substack, right? You publish something, it gets likes, but the thing is, I think you form a relationship with your readers that you don't have in a traditional publishing world.
That is very true. That is very,
And
very true.
when you're out there speaking, in a lot of cases, you're speaking to people you've never met, you've never really had a conversation with, you've never really had a more than comments back and forth on each other's posts, but you feel like you know that person because you've read their writing and they read your writing. In a lot of ways, you know that person better than people they grew up with that think they knew them. Because the one thing I think I found almost universally on Substack, and this is humorous, is you talk about Facebook. You know how many subscribers I have from my Facebook, my personal friends? I would almost guarantee it's zero. I'm pretty sure it's zero, um, because they grew up with me in high school
Yeah.
and young adulthood, and that Joe didn't write,
Yeah.
and and that was the image of me that they built in their head, and they'll never let go of that image.
I agree. It happens
And
to me too.
yeah, they don't like change. And I'm still the guy that was, doing burnouts at the high school parking lot because I was a complete jackass. And that's all they'll ever remember about me. Um, and then it's a different dynamic. And uh, I've, I've watched people and I've read their stuff, and I know there is that relationship between reader and writer. And the unique thing about it is it was a relationship between writer and writer and reader and reader, and you were constantly swapping roles. And um, although it's not personal, it feels personal. And as we all grew, and there was that, you know, it was almost inevitable in a lot of ways, John, because you start out growing your Substack, right? The way to grow your Substack is to comment on other people and then go
Yeah.
enjoy other, and then you get so busy with yours that you start tailing off of that. And then the new group comes in and they're all over your post, but then they grow and then they don't have time. And you're
Yeah.
constantly churning. And the logical you realizes this, but that human side of you is screaming all the time, what did I do? And how do I fix this? And the answer is you don't fix it, because the thing that got you to where you are is that was or in my case, that was me. That was me being authentic. That was me being unique. That was me being me. And if I felt myself turning towards that performance, and like I was sitting there one day, I went back and I said, what are my most popular posts? And about 30 minutes into it, I was like, what the hell are you doing? You can't reproduce, this came to you, months ago, and now you're, you know, I just couldn't do it. And I
Yeah.
started fighting with myself.
Actually, there is so we talk about, there's a lot of people who are in the education business category, which is probably the most easiest place you can get a lot of hits.
Hmm.
I don't, and literature is probably one of the toughest because you have everybody's in literature one way or another. And I was reading these posts, and I was like I was at the point where I was like, what's going on with my post? Why I'm not getting things? So I'm researching this, kind of like, how can I be a better writer? How can I influence? How can I get more attraction? And then all of a sudden, my feed started popping in all these people telling me how to grow,
Hmm.
and they're talking about Substack growth. They're doing all this, and I go on their account, and they have like 200 people, like subscribers. How are you gonna? Like, I'm not saying you can't teach me anything, but how did you go through? It's like going to war. You know, you, how did you go through the battles to get to where you're at today? That's not possible. Like you didn't go the battlefields, you didn't go through the minefields, you didn't do all that stuff, and now you're telling me how to write and how to influence my writing. I mean, that makes no sense. And then you have other people out there who jump on a lot of lives, and they're like, "Well, you pay me $1,000, and I'll show you how to do this." And I'm like, no, that's not being authentic. That's not being real. Yes, this is harder to do. It's not an easy journey by what you and I are doing, just writing for the sake of, for our own sanity, for our own peace. And if people resonate with that, that's awesome. But it's not as easy. This is not an easy path. An easier path would be simple as I buy a list, throw all that name in there. I'll balloon up to 50,000 people if I wanted to, and I can make a big, huge dent in the world. And then hopefully they resonate with my writing, and or maybe they don't complain like, why did I get dumped in this thing? I've seen people do it a couple times, and I do not see the value in it, because when I look at the numbers, they're still lower than 50%, 15% like or comments. So I don't know what that means.
I don't either. And like I said, I tried my best not to pay attention to those things. Um, Although, I'll be honest and say I do. I know when I'm getting liked. I know when I'm getting comments.
Yeah.
Um, I won't pretend that I don't. I think, um, you know, a lot of what I say sometimes I understand is controversial and it upsets people. And if it upsets you, you need to examine yourself, not me.
Yeah.
Um, Authenticity is the most abused friggin' word on Substack right now.
Yeah.
Um, and it's very apparent that a lot of them aren't being authentic and they aren't being genuine, because I can go read your article 15 times in 10 minutes, just reworded in a different way. And that's not how human beings, you know, you want to, the greatest articles I've ever read, were, you know, a, somebody that, they're, I'll throw a name out there. Jason McKenzie is one of my favorites. He lost his daughter and his wife in short order. You can't manufacture that pain.
No.
And for a man to have the courage to get on there every day or every other day or every week and talk about that is something I can respect. It's people that are talking about suicide. It's it's people that are talking. It's people talking about coming out of the closet. It's people talking about the abuse they've suffered from their parents. It's people that are being absolutely. I'm going to take my soul and I'm going to place it here on the screen or a piece of paper and tell you, I don't want a fancy poem, because I don't think that catches the heartache and the
Right.
the agony that comes through some of these people. You can't package that. You can't turn that into a product. No matter how hard you try to shove that into a product, you can't. And I just finished my second book in short order because I was taking breaks. And part of writing those books was I would start the chapter by asking, I would sit there until I got the most uncomfortable question I could ask myself, and then dig through that question. And I would write out just gibberish on notes until I got to the point where I was like, this is the crux of the matter. And this is what needs to be in this book. And it's not telling you how to be, like my masculinity book. There's a million of them out there that are telling you how to be a better man. I'm not interested in telling you how to be a better man. I'm interested in the facet of masculinity that my whole stick, I should say stick, that's bad, from the beginning has been we are given what we need at birth, and we should stand in the question and ask ourselves repeatedly, what's next? What's next? What's next? What's next in my life? Not I know, because I know is the enemy of knowledge. We know what it is to be masculine in a genuine sense. We are trained out of being masculine from the time we're old enough to speak. We're taught to be good boys. We're taught to be fixers. We're taught to be silent. We're taught to swallow our pain. We're taught to be tough. We're taught to not be emotional. We're taught to not ask for help. We're taught all this garbage from the time we're little boys. And it's not a parent standing there saying, don't do this. It's society that over and over. And if you learn it through osmosis more than you learn it through anything. You internalize these things. So this is not how men act. And then we get into relationships and we get into women and we get into our wives and we wonder why we can't understand them. We can't understand them because we don't understand ourselves.
Well, because we've been conditioned not to learn about ourselves.
Absolutely. And the majority of men the majority of males out there now will not admit that they're terrified of themselves.
Well, I learned that lesson in my 50s.
Yeah. Well, that's when I learned it. When I got in my 50s, I realized that what scared me more than anything was me.
Oh, yeah.
And asking the questions that I needed to ask about myself. And that's why I said that earlier. You get to the point where you ever heard of Pogo, the cartoon?
Yeah.
He had one little famous cartoon, and it was just a one pane. And he said, "We have met the enemy, and he is us." And that's a very apt statement, especially when we're talking about masculinity and men. And we think we're being good providers. We think we're being good people. We think we're doing everything right, but we're killing ourselves in the process because we're refusing to be honest with ourselves. Mm-hmm. And if there was any phrase I could strike from human existence, it would be "I'm fine." Because how many times has that phrase been uttered?
Well, it's the same thing. It's the same thing. Like, so I don't know if you knew I had the medical issue that I had, but everybody keeps saying, "Well, how you doing?" If I answer that honestly, I'd be like, "I'm fucked in the head."
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I almost fucking died. Excuse my language. I don't mean to be cussing, but
no, that's fine.
Head, I'm thinking that way because how did I get myself here? Like, but if I say that to somebody, how are they going to respond to me? You're weak. You should be stronger than that. And that's what we were taught very young.
Absolutely. You know, the
And
same thing.
it's hard. And I know a lot of vets who went through what they went through, and a lot of them I don't understand enough to. I mean, I'm sorry about it, and I just don't understand enough about what they're going through. And I'm sure you have some of the conditions there too. And I don't mean that to be rude, but I mean, I've never experienced that, so I'll never understand that. But I can sympathize it to a point where I can see it hurts, but I would never fully understand that. Same thing with, like, hey, you're fine. Well, what do you mean? How am I fine? Like, am I fine? Okay. Am I fine? Happy? Like, fine can mean so many things.
I'm fine as us shutting down our emotions and our responses.
Right.
And you know, because I was in my 50s, I lost everything I'd worked for. I lost my company. I lost everything I'd worked for. And, you know, I took pride in what I had made. I
Yeah.
built a big company. I had fancy cars. I had the nice house. I had everything. You know, I wore, you know, Omega watches, and um, I was the dude.
You were
And I
doing good.
lost, yeah, and then I lost all that, and then I lost my father, and then, you know, I had all this stuff happen. And still through that period, I was like, I'm fine. I'm all right. I can handle it. I'm handling it. When I would come home, and I'm not exaggerating, I would go hide from my family. I would sit in the basement and just break down, and just, you know, there were days I'm like, I cannot take this anymore. I cannot take another minute of it. And I would just sit there until I could get enough of it out of me. Not all of it. This was the dangerous part. I would get enough out to where I could function again. And I wasn't dealing with the problems. I was dealing with the effects of the problem. And I would sit there and I'd come up and tell everybody else like, how you doing? Are you doing? I'm fine. I'm fine. You know, I was, you know, and the irony of it is everybody else knew you weren't fine.
Or
I
they,
think
or did they care?
well, I think your family cares, and I think people around you care, and I think certain friends, and even, you know, so we're talking about Substack. I think people realize you're not fine, and I go back now and I read comments, and there are comments where like, Joe, are
Yeah.
you okay? And I'm like, yeah, you know, I'm cool. I'm just writing. No, I wasn't cool. I was like, you know, I'm, you know, pretty pissed off, and I'm pretty angry, and I can't really figure things out. And but then I would go back and sit down and write and get the stuff out, and I would feel better about it for a little bit. And um, you know, it was a disservice not just to me. It was a disservice to my family. It was a disservice to my children. It was a disservice to my mother. Because at the end of the day, I'm fine is bullshit.
I
You're
agree.
not fine. And um, you know, I can't relate to your situation, just like you probably can't relate to mine. Um, but you know exactly what I'm saying. You're trying to tell everybody else to not dig into that wound a little bit.
No, you're trying to bury it. You're trying to shield it. You're trying to put it on your mind because I mean, you're conditioned to put it out. You're conditioned not to think about it. You're conditioned just to forge ahead.
You know, there's one post out of all my posts that I did that I absolutely regret, and I wrote it because I was on top of the world that day. I thought I had everything beaten. I thought I'd solved everything, and I wrote that post and I posted it and let everybody read it. And I sat there and I read it next day and I said, you know what, Joe, you're completely full of shit. And I said, now you can't go out there and take it back, but um, you're just completely full of it. And if I could go back and unpublish that, I would, but I refuse to delete it, and because I use that now as a reminder,
Hmm.
where um, it's all part of the journey, and then I think it's all part of you. I don't know that you can be 1,000 or not 1,000. I don't know if you can be 100% honest with yourself all the time, but I think there's a goal for me to try to be as real with myself as much of the time as I can. And Substack, for all its faults, for writing, for all its the agony it causes sometimes, is the one facet of life where you can actually lay your life out there and say, "This is me," and if you don't like it, shove off.
Right.
And some do.
Yeah. Yeah. You put a post up, and all of a sudden they can find an exit fast enough, and they're gone, and it's just sad. I mean, then so with all that said, where is Joe today?
Joe's going to keep writing. I did. I was talking to a couple friends. I did those two books, which were kind of related, but I keep following the questions because each book ends with a question. Not you know. I don't think we solve things. I think um, I think we just open up different questions and different opportunities and different roads to go down. And now I've got another road to go down, which means my my journey is going to take another twist, and inevitably that means that I'm going to lose people because they're used to Joe writing this type of poetry and this type of stuff. But I am going to remain true to myself and do the journey that I was meant to do, and I will trust that that ends up where it needs to be. And that's part of what I was fighting was the sorry, she just got up.
It's okay.
um, um, she's
Oh,
this is my little one.
hello, little one.
So um, I'll just let the journey go where it is.
Gotcha.
Um,
So you mentioned
I'm going to keep writing. I'll
so if you're saying, are you more of a poet writer, or are you more of a literature writer? I mean, are you very poetic? I mean, I don't think you're very poetic. I think you're very descriptive.
I do I you know that's for Substack. I got into poetry and I started writing poetry, and I enjoy poetry because poetry is a challenge.
Yeah, I don't like
Writing
poetry.
is not easy for me,
Yeah,
but poetry is. I'm not musical. I have no rhythm. Um, but poetry is a challenge, and I've written poetry. I've got two books on poetry that I did last year because I was so proud of my poetry. I was like, Joe did poetry. um, it's obviously not won any awards, but it was
yeah.
just me, like, celebrating the fact that I could do poetry. And I'm more literature, and the biggest challenge for me with poetry is you have to be short, and I don't like being short. I like, I grew up on Hemingway and Oscar Wilde and um, James Fenimore Cooper and Mark Twain, and all these people influence my writing, and uh, poetry can poetry teases the senses. Literature, you are bringing people into your world, and when you can actually flesh out not just an emotion, but a physical world, and you can actually transport people to that place and time. Especially when I write about I've written some tough stuff about the military, my time in the military. I wrote about, I don't know if you read that, some of the horrific stuff, but
I've read them. Honestly, I read them long ago, but I remember some. I remember some of their writings. But the ones I really enjoyed the most was when you were traveling.
well,
Like it was like
yeah.
Atlanta, and then you went to Texas. I think I can't
Well,
remember.
yeah, but there was some literature. There were, I'm not going to stand here and say all that was completely. A
Yeah,
lot of
yeah,
that was and all that happened when I was 18, 17, 18, 19 years
yeah.
old. And, um, but even now, writing about Chicago where I am, or, like the other day, I wrote one about the beach because I missed the beach so horribly, that was the way I could get myself to the beach that day, was to write about that. And, um, I love the literature. And, another thing, I talked to one of my, or some of the other writers the other day, a couple of friends I've got, was the things that are fun to write about the most are the things that we have been writing about for 2,000 years. And the reason we've been writing about it for 2,000 years is because we haven't found a way to do it right. And that's love. And,
Mm.
even to an extent, um, religion, God. Because, I don't think, um, I don't. I think it's these things that you can't quantify and qualify that are things that are interesting to try to reach for. And I don't mean God in the biblical sense. I mean whatever it is out there. You know where, and the reason we've written love poems and love stories for millennia is because nobody's written it perfectly yet. But that doesn't stop us from trying.
Hmm.
And um, grief, grief is the same way. I mean, how do you write how do you write in a just and perfect way what it is to lose a child or lose a parent? Um, you can't, but there's a beauty in the effort that not only serves the public, it serves you in the effort. And when you speak about your experience, John, with the issue where you almost died and everything, when you're willing to get in a place, and I'm not coaching you by any means, I'm just talking about myself personally. When I get into a headspace where I can actually write like that and just let everything go, it's almost like nirvana, because
Oh yeah.
you're just wiping out all the dust and clearing the room and saying, this isn't perfectly how I felt, but it's as close as I can get to describe it. And you empty out that, and it doesn't heal you forever, because I don't think, it's another term I hate, is healing. Um, I don't think we heal. I think we're constantly, you know,
Adjusting.
yes, and we don't come back from these things. You don't come back from losing a parent. You don't come back from losing a child. You don't come back from tragedy. You fold those into your life and you make them a facet of who you are. And you can choose to deal with those how you want to. And that is through suppression and anger and bitterness, or you can turn it into something else. And that, to me, is what literature is. It's a way to turn that hate and that anger and that brutality and my experience of the last 3 years into something that I can sit there and admire and hold my hand and say, Joe, this is beautiful.
Yeah.
And that's worth the effort. That's worth the effort. Even if it turns out that nobody ever reads it. You know, I've got hundreds of pieces that I'll never let anybody read until after I'm dead. Um,
Hmm.
but they were worth the effort to write. They were worth the effort to produce. And um, I've got a whole folder downstairs that are letters to my kids that they won't be able to read until after I'm gone. But it's facets of their father, you know, that, if I never see my 3-year-old married, at least I put myself in that situation briefly to say, this is what I would have said. Or, um, you know, if, fall down the steps tomorrow, this is what I thought about, because we're all human, right, John? We think about these things. What happens when my child starts school? What happens when my child graduates? What happens when my son gets married? And I wrote these things out because there's a likelihood I won't be there for it.
Yeah.
And I want it out in the world. And that's a way to deal with that instead of holding it internally.
Well, that was so when I really started to write for myself, I was writing to leave a legacy for my children.
Mm-hmm.
Footsteps where they can go and say, hey, this was dad, this is what he was doing. And, this is where he's writing these books, so they can go and read about me in some ways. And at least they could see that, I hope, I could say it in my own in my own words without any interference. And, it's pretty powerful when you put it on words where other people who have been suppressing your words, suppressing you as a person. And I used writing a way to express it in a way that is indirectly, I think, still allows my children to come and find me if they need to talk to me. And like you said, I don't know if tomorrow I'm alive or not. I know I'm alive right now, but anything can happen within the hour. Anything can happen in 5 minutes, guaranteed.
Absolutely. And I'd add, it's not just our children, because I find more and more that, and I wish people realize this, everybody is fascinating to some degree.
I agree.
We would be much more fascinating to each other if we would allow ourselves to be seen.
Ooh.
And that, in a culture, I think it's almost sick that the most beautiful and wonderful a human being can be is when they're completely vulnerable and completely exposed. But we use so much of our effort and our time hiding ourselves from each other and trying to be the same. And I don't mean that in a cliche sense of being unique or being special. I just mean that, I find it utterly fascinating that there are 8+ billion people on this planet, and none of us take the exact same path to get to where we're going. And just when you start thinking about the enormity of that, that's just incredible. And we've all got something unique and wondrous to add to that collection of voices. And it's how many people just never get the chance to, or never afford themselves the chance to do that. So when I get bitter, like I was the other day, I get angry. I don't know, in 100 years or 200 years, if somebody reads my stuff and says, you know what, that's pretty cool. I don't think that Charles Dickens knew he was a success, but a lot of them had no idea, that, Hemingway, for example, how would he know that this far along that we'd still be sitting here talking about him and his words and some of the greats. So,
well, especially the 1920s when there was so much art being made. I mean, it was after the Great War, and like everybody was in France, and the way they were living, the way they were socializing, writing, arguing over stupid things. I mean, the 1920 was probably one of the fascinating periods of our world. It was probably the most creative, um, from my standpoint, and other than a couple
Well, who's
other,
to say 100 years from now, ours won't be the most interesting? I mean,
it could be right.
look at how absurd everything is now. In 100 years, people are going to look back and go, my God, what an interesting period. And it'll be interesting in then, because hopefully they're not dealing with the consequences, but it'll be interesting in the same regard. I think we're selling ourselves short, and we need to be the same voices for our generation that those people were for that generation.
Mm-hmm.
And
I'm not saying we're not. I mean,
I understand. I know.
This period now, we have the internet, we have social media, we have all these things. We're well connected to anybody if we want to be connected. That's one. Number two, we have so much opportunities.
Are we?
Well, it's if we decide to.
Excuse
me. It's sometimes we don't.
I think it's one of the biggest irony of our time is that we're so very well connected electronically and socially, and so far removed from each other.
I agree with that.
It's, and as Americans, we have gotten incrementally worse at it with our, I don't want to use the term political correctness, but the double speak and the corporate speak and we've got to be nice. It's one of the things I admire about like the Brits. They're caustic a little bit and they're brutal, and we find them offensive. But I always found out I knew where I stood with a British person. Whereas I stand in a meeting with an American, I'm trying to decipher their LinkedIn gobbledygook.
Yeah.
To figure out where I'm standing.
Are they honest people? Because most of them are not.
No. Well, again, we have made a concerted effort to hide ourselves from each other.
Yeah.
Because we're so terrified, in so many facets. And I don't want to keep this going forever because I know you got things to do, but I don't mean just emotionally, but I mean emotionally, I mean sexually, I mean financially, I mean every facet of our existence we hide from other people because we fear judgment and ostracization. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Ostracization. It's a tough one to get out from everybody else. And the irony is we all have 99% of the same thoughts. We're just all hiding these thoughts from each other.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like I said, I don't want to say the society's sick. I think society has. I think it's ironic, and I think it's even more important that people, and I've said this in many of my lives, that people are brave enough to get out there and say, you know what, this is exactly how I feel. This is exactly what I think. This is exactly how screwed up I am. Because it's not the ones that comment, it's the 50 that read that go, I'm that screwed up too.
Yeah.
I just don't want to admit it in writing. The job's still being done. But again, back to what I said a few minutes ago, the effort is still worth it. And if I ever felt like the effort wasn't worth it, I would just throw everything in the trash and close my computer and I'd say I'm done with it. But after I sat hard with it for a few days and finished up some things I wanted to, and I do want to point out that if you read that piece, which was Finney, one of the last lines was, "This man will not write again." And that is one of my core beliefs, is that this man that you're talking to today will not be the man that wakes up tomorrow. And when I really break myself down, I come back a different human being. I look the same, I got the same voice, but I'm not the same man that walked out of the room. And I think we as men and women need to acknowledge that. we love consistency. We love that, our lives remain the same and static throughout, but that's not who we are as humans. We're ever changing, we're always morphing.
Well,
And the man,
but you said something really important a few minutes ago, where you said if I talked to a friend of mine who I knew I was a childhood, they already had that impression that was you, and you've never changed. And it doesn't matter how old you are, you've never changed, and that's their perception. And if you try to
Mhm.
change their perception, it'd be challenging because because they've already had that inside you. Even though you have changed personally, they're not allowing you to change, or they're not allowing themselves to accept you changed. And that's where you say, excuse me, where you say that person is not going to be writing, which is true, because you've learned something at that moment, and that moment changed you for whatever reason. And I don't mean that negatively. I mean that it just changed you. And now, as you progress throughout those days, you've looked back, reflect, and say, you know what, I could probably do better. Maybe I could do a little bit different. And you're working yourself through it. And you're right. But what people will see was that last piece. Do you know what I mean? And they'll try to
Mhm.
always compare you to that. And I'm not saying that is an I don't I'm not saying that that's what's going to happen, but I just know some people will do that just for the sake of that's just human nature.
Well, I think you're trying to overwrite their reality
Right.
because that's who they see you as, and um, they're not built to process things that way. And you know, on the other hand, you're not built to process them that way.
No.
And so, as you move through life, I think you have to accept the fact, in a deeper sense, that it's why people have so few great friends, because there are very few that are willing to accept those changes in you throughout your lifespan. And there are some that'll be friends for a season, and that's fine.
Yeah.
And maybe that's the answer to the whole thing with the Substack. There are people that'll read you for a season,
Right.
and then you move on to a different season, and some will follow you into spring, and some will leave you in winter, and that's the nature of the world.
Right. I like that. I'm stealing that, by the way.
um,
I'm stealing it. I like that one.
it's just like I said, I'm I'm very happy with where I am this week in contrast to last time. I was upset that I canceled, but I knew I couldn't do it justice, and um, I just I wasn't in the right headspace for it. And I said, this is I think one of the few areas in my life where I actually very much pride myself in being as authentic and as genuine as I can possibly be.
Well,
Um,
I didn't never took it as I never took it as um I just took it as you just needed some time. However
well,
that looked.
I did, but I
and
needed.
and you needed to figure that out. And coming on the podcast probably would have hurt you more. And if you didn't work on it, I mean, it would have hurt you more. And that's something I didn't want. I mean, and also, I didn't really care about the podcast. I was more worried about you as a person and make sure you were okay, because you did put out some stuff that weren't. I mean, looking back, you could probably respect us saying, "Well, what is he planning on doing?" You know, um, and that's okay. And I'm not saying that's your intention. That just came across that way. That's all.
No, I understand. And perception is reality. Um, I said it. it was just as simple as that. I just needed to step back and
Yeah.
examine myself and say, where am I going from here? What am I going to do from here? Because I enjoy this, but I also enjoy this. And I did. I felt like I was being performative, which was causing something in me to rebel, and I wasn't happy with it. And I lost that. I just lost that wanting to get up every morning and write something, and that really bothered me. And it
Yeah.
once I sat down and examined, like I said, I found a different path, and it's not to say that the stuff I used to write I won't do anymore, because I still love that. I still love that type of, you know, because I bounce from ridiculous to absurdist to whimsical to, scathingly political to, I'm all over the place, and that's who I am. And
Yeah.
I've always said on my Substack, if you're looking for a niche here, you're in the wrong place, because tomorrow you don't know what you're going to get. If I,
So do you write? So are you coming back to write? I mean, you wrote once a week, maybe. I can't remember.
Man, I used to write every day. I used to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and write, and I would put one out every day, or I would at least put up something that I'd written years ago and never published. And then I kind of trimmed it back, and I went to 3 or 4 times a week. And then I just kind of went to once a week, because I was trying to wrap up the 2 books that I was doing, because they got really under my skin, and I figured out where I wanted to go with those. So I finished those. And now, I found that I do like the video. I do like the podcast. I do like the like this. I like the open forums, the talking. I think it's fun. I had the round table where I would bring several guys on, and sometimes it was a game show format, and sometimes it was open forum, and it was a lot of fun. But it was always genuine, and so going down the road, I'm not going to tell you what I'm going. I don't know. I may go back to writing 5 days a week. I may go to 3 days a week. I may do my, jump up my podcast, and I think that's what's most important for me to realize is I don't owe anybody anything but myself.
You're gonna do you.
And if I want to do this, I'm going to do this, and if I don't, then I won't.
Right.
And I think the best thing I could say, John, is if you hang on, it'll be a hell of a ride. It's always a good ride. It's never boring.
Yeah.
You just don't know where we'll be tomorrow. And that to me is a selling point all its own.
Yeah. So are you originally from South Carolina? Or Georgia. And you were because you talked about the ocean. So I was wondering how close, because you have that Southern accent.
I was born in South Georgia, close to the ocean. So the ocean became very important to me as a kid. And when you're in the South, or when you're in Georgia, every vacation was the ocean. So a lot of my formative events happened at the ocean.
Mm-hmm.
I was 12 years old the first time I fell in love with a girl in an arcade and in Panama City.
Every kid, every boy at 12 years old.
And just everything, you had spring break, everything happened around water in the South. And then I moved around. I lived overseas in the military. But I lived in Italy and Israel, and always near the ocean. So the ocean's always held a special place in my heart. And then I get up here into the Midwest, and
you're landlocked for the most part.
Well, there's the lake, but
That's not the
they brag about the lake, but
same.
it doesn't matter how big it is. It's a lake. And yeah, I. But I tell you something I've realized, and then like I said, with the truest expression I think I've ever heard is "you can never go home."
Yeah, that's
And I
true.
left to go to the military, and I came back to Georgia, and Georgia was no longer the Georgia that I grew up in, and it was no longer home. And for years, I traveled in business and went all over the country, and that was great. So I create home through my writing, and when I write, that's my because I wrote one called My River. That was I grew up next to a river that I used to go swimming in because I was convinced I was Tom Sawyer, and but it was my river.
Yeah,
It was called the Yellow River, but it was my river, and um, it's my ocean, and we all have that. We all have my place that we can never go back to physically, but we never quite leave either.
I do like the other one you just said. I write to create my home. Is that how you said that? Or
Yeah,
I write
I mean, I create the home that I remember in my writing,
in my writing.
and I create the you know that's why I say, if I write stories about my youth, it's about 70% accurate because we never remember anything accurately.
No,
Um, and is some of it embellished? Absolutely. Um, is it actual factual all the way through? No, but it's what I remember, and the unique and wonderful thing about being human and literature is that a good book makes you believe that you were there.
that's true.
And that's no different than reality. And that's one of the things I found as a child was reading Huckleberry Finn or reading Tom Sawyer or reading The Leather Stocking Tales by James Fenimore Cooper. I was the character. So I know what it was like. I've been the last Mohican. I've been Huckleberry Finn, and it, it I can't quite speak to how wonderful I think that is for it's one of the things that drew me to writing, you know, is, you know, our brains don't know the difference.
So I'm going to share you something about Hemingway that you
Mm-hmm.
don't. So I'm on a major quest. I've been to Italy where he was stationed during World War One.
Mm-hmm.
I've been to Paris, been to Spain, been to North New Jersey, been in the Midwest where he was born. So my goal is to visit every place that he lived. The only place that I've never hit, well, obviously Cuba is one of them, but was Key West. And you think that would be the easiest one to get to?
Yeah,
Yeah. So
you just keep driving till the end.
keep going south. So when are these books when are these books are going to be published?
They're
And
out now.
oh, are they on Amazon?
Yeah, I got Feral Masculinity and Holy Hell.
Holy hell. Okay. Gotcha.
And one of them is obviously masculinity, and the other one was another term I hate is deconstruction, but it is about how you know religion and
Mhm.
in my life and my experiences and how we've dealt with it in the United States. So they're both. I want to say they've both been critically reviewed, but and they
Yeah.
have, but Not critically, unless you count the people that I sent a few to critics, but they've been received well. I mean, they're again. I think the interesting thing about it is a lot of a lot of things you read like that. They're trying to prescribe a remedy.
Yeah.
And what I'm inviting people to do is say, look, just ask yourself this question. And if you're willing to sit in the discomfort of this question, you'll get some answers. And you may not like the answers, but you'll get some interesting feedback. And my goal in writing, even when I write on Substack, is to leave everybody asking a question.
Right.
And that was the goal of the book. So I did write another one earlier this year called The Coward's War, which is, if you're not political, don't pick it up. I'm going to discourage you from grabbing my book if you don't like being fired up. But it is, masculinity in this stage of my life has been one of those things I'm very interested in, because I think, I don't know why, I think, again, paying attention to what irks me, and this whole alpha movement crap drives me crazy. It's like I told somebody today, and I'm gonna get flippant here for a second, but a whole movement that's based on animals that sniff each other's asses in greeting is ludicrous to me. But that's where we are as a society, and I don't, I think my motive now in life is, I just want to be a better man for my little girl. And I realize now that I wasn't a bad father to my older daughters. I just wasn't as good as I should have been. And I realize now that the man I was in my 20s was not the man I wish my daughter would meet. And that shook me up a little bit.
Right.
So, I just got deep into it. And it brought up a lot of uncomfortable questions. So I wrote those questions down and I stewed on them for a while, and I said, okay, this is the book. I can't tell you how to be a better man.
Right.
But I can tell you the questions that I ask myself that push me down the road. And maybe that's all we can do. Maybe that is the best we can do, is just keep asking the questions, and then the next question, and then the next question.
Well, I'll definitely put your books in the next post after the podcast, so people can go and get your book.
I appreciate it. And it's not just for men. I don't want to make it sound like it's just for men, because I will pitch it. I do. I think it's probably some of my best writing ever.
Oh, good.
Because I wasn't, pushing myself to push it out on Substack or do anything. And I will say this: if you're a man and read it and you're not uncomfortable, then you weren't paying attention. And that was my goal, was to make men, and in some instances their wives, uncomfortable. Because if a woman was to ask herself the same questions about her husband, and it's not about the common stuff, it's about the little details,
Right.
And that's where it came from.
So, and just before we close out here, what's the one thing after what kind of advice or suggestion or takeaway that you can give somebody who's struggling like this, or I mean, I don't want to keep saying authentic and feel your pain and all that because we've kind of like beat it up. But is there anything that you can come across and that you could pass along?
I think the best thing I've ever done is, like I said, I keep my phone and I keep one note open all the time. And as I go through my day and something bothers me, I write it down. And then at night, I have a dedicated time that I sit down after everybody's gone to bed,
Yeah.
or I'll sit there and think, okay, Joe, why are you bothered by this?
Yeah.
And you know, I hate to use the cliche of looking in the mirror, but it's staring at yourself and say, are you willing to face that discomfort long enough to get, maybe not to the answer, but to the next question that propels you to another place? So when you get stuck and you get to doubting what you're doing, the only way through anything, the only way through any plateau, the only way through any trouble in your life is discomfort.
Right.
And if you're not willing to sit in that discomfort, then you're going to have hell to pay. And it may not be today, but it will come. And, I'm not one to give advice, but I will say, it's much easier in the long run to sit there and, I don't care if you got to go sit in the bathtub and cry like a little baby for a little while.
Yeah.
Just go find that answer. Just go find that answer or that next question. And that'll get you where you need to go. It won't solve all your problems, but it'll get you a little further down the road. And that's the best we can do sometimes as humans. That's the absolute best we can do as people.
So Joe, you're just on Substack. Are you on anything else that you want to share?
No, I'm not. I've got my own website that I'm building.
Okay.
And I've got all my books, and I'll have some stuff that's not on there. I've started building my YouTube. And then I've got something big coming out in April.
Oh, good.
That I'm not gonna, I've been working on for a year. And then I do have the Bound by Words thing I got going on, which is I don't know if you saw that. So if you haven't signed up for that, you can go on my Substack and sign up. It's basically a book of poetry, and it goes from author to author to author that I've met on Substack, and each one of them writes their poem and then sends it to the next and sends it to the next.
Oh,
and
really?
It's the same binder and the same pen for every poet. So by the time it's done, when it gets back here, hopefully it's full of poetry, and I'm gonna take that and I'm gonna donate the book to one of the associations. And not fame, but
Yeah.
it's a unique project. So it'll have about
Cool.
300 different poets.
Wow. That's awesome, Joe.
And it doesn't have to be poetry. I mean, if you just want to write a little short piece and put it in there, that's fine too.
Yeah. Well, Joe, hey, this is thank you for coming on. Thank you
Thanks,
for
Ron.
coming back with
Absolutely.
with a different version. And we all struggle here, and I think it's good just to talk it out. And I appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and good luck with everything. And I'll keep reading.
All right, cool.